Karma's Eastern term that was imported into Western culture 50, 60, 70 years ago and has sort of percolated in spiritual circles since then. And I think for most people, it tends to feel like some sort of debt, some sort of residual energetic debt from prior lifetimes, perhaps. We're not quite sure, but it feels like there's something that we have to work off, undo that karmic indebtedness. And to Western ears, it doesn't feel all that dissimilar from this idea that's embedded culturally in the West of original sin. Like there's something lacking, something not quite right. You're not quite sure what or how it got there or why it's your fault, but somehow it is, and you need to do something about it. It's like unworthy unless proven, and until it's proven otherwise. So the sense to Western ears of karmic debt, it seems to, it's not an entirely new concept, different term, but, we can sort of understand that in that very sort of generalized way. And there's a lot of sense in this country of unworthiness. Even among very successful people, there can be still this sense of unworthiness, and the success is really an attempt to work that off in practical terms. If I have enough success in my life, I'll maybe whittle away at this sense of unworthiness, maybe even tilt the needle all the way over to the positive side. Maybe I'll feel okay, or maybe even worthy, who knows? So there can be the sense of not being quite sure where all of this came from, but it's sort of, it doesn't seem totally unreasonable either. It sort of feeds into the sense of some sense of lack. Like I have to prove my worthiness to be in this life. Somehow I have to accomplish something. I have to do something. I have to sort of demonstrate my worthiness in some way. But as soon as we buy into this underlying sense, however vague it might be, we can. The next question is, well, how do we fix that? How do we, undo our karma? And the theory is somehow there's a past debt. We don't quite know how it happened, but it happened in the past. And lifetime is an opportunity to fix that, to get rid of enough karma that we might qualify for the grand prize of enlightenment. But one of the assumptions there is that this is a necessary prerequisite. I've got to fix my karma. Maybe, who knows, maybe I can do it in this lifetime. Maybe it'll take me 50 more lifetimes, who knows, but good for the ride. Right? I mean, there's a whole number of assumptions in there. One is, one is that there is a next lifetime. Another is that in the next lifetime, I will remember this project of undoing all my bad karma. And then even if we're just looking at this lifetime, we have to ask, is my scorecard so far, is it a net positive or not? Or for most of us, I'd guess it was a mixed bag. So, on net, have we progressed towards fixing our karma? I mean, does the positive actions that we've taken in this lifetime offset the negative ones? 60-40, 90-10 perhaps, don't know. But there's this sense of how much is enough. We're not quite sure what the rules are, and we're not quite sure how in debt we are. But there's this sense of somehow something is lacking and I have to do something about it. I have to fix something about me in order to become worthy of grace. But there's, I mean, all kinds of questions arise. You know, who exactly is keeping score? You know, are they fair? Did they get the facts right? You know, do I need an advocate, someone to, you know, advocate on my behalf? You know, we don't know. All of this is sort of speculative. You know, but what we're left with is just this vague sense of I need to do something other than as things are in this moment. There's something lacking, and I need to fix it somehow. I need to do something to become qualified, right? But hopefully we can see just by asking, I mean, a few honest questions about this, hopefully we can see there's a lot of speculation and a lot of really iffy assumptions about how all this works. You know, this thing about karma and, you know, where we stand and, you know, are we paying off that debt? Is it going to happen this lifetime, and if it's even necessary, or more fundamentally, is even this concept of karma true? You know, we don't know that either. So rather than speculate and guess and even worry about how the metaphysics of all of that, I think it's far more productive just to come back to the basic principle of karma, which is cause and effect. You know, we take action A and it has a result B. So that's far easier to see. The only thing about that simplistic equation is they don't say how or when, right? Action A, result B, but it might not always be immediate and it might not always, you know, fit one-on-one. Sometimes, I mean, we have all had the experience of seeing someone do something really ugly and causes a lot of people suffering, and yet there's no apparent immediate downside for the person. There's no punishment immediately. And on the other side, we can feel sometimes like we've done a wonderful good deed and, you know, it's not appreciated. There's no benefit immediately forthcoming, right? So we don't, you know, it requires a certain degree of faith that, you know, doing good deeds will somehow at some later point result in good results, right? But if we're just doing good deeds in order to earn merit to advance our spiritual probabilities of awakening, how noble is that? I mean, does that count as good karma, or is that neutral karma, or is that just self-interested karma? You know, we need to just really see what the underlying motivations of doing good acts are. I mean, does it just come out of the overflowing of our caring for others? That's beautiful. You know, if we're doing it as a strategy to improve our spiritual probabilities, then maybe not so much. Okay, so then we're left with, well, where does that leave us? So there's a really powerful quote by Nisargadatta, and he says, it's your refusal to examine your own suffering that creates karma. And it's the indifference to your own suffering that perpetuates it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first read that, it was like a punch to the belly. You know, it's the indifference to your own suffering that perpetuates it. So in other words, until we really examine what it is that creates underpins our behavior or speech or even internal thoughts that causes ourselves or other people to suffer. Until we really examine that, we're just perpetuating it, right? If we don't examine it, it continues. So just this sense of it's the indifference to your own suffering that perpetuates it. In other words, we have a choice. I mean, we can either look deeply at what is causing that suffering, what behavior results in suffering, or we get to live out the rest of our lives at the end of that leash. Byron Katie, the American sage, had something very similar to say, very simply: karma is an unexplored belief. Same thing, right? Until we examine it, we're condemned to repeat that behavior, and we'll continue to get very similar results from it. And the only way to get past that karma, get past that pattern of cause and effect, is to really look deeply at the cause. So by cause, I don't mean they said this and I got angry, so they were the cause of my anger. That's not what we're talking about. The other person may do whatever they do. They often do, right? But then, the anger arises here. And so if the anger arises here, what is it that underpins that causes the reaction of anger? It's not actually the other person. That's just the trigger. But the same person could say the same thing to another person, and the other person wouldn't react angrily. But if it happens here, then what's the underlying belief that is that we find offensive, that we react to? And maybe it's something very simple like, well, they shouldn't have said what they said. They shouldn't say it the way they say it. They shouldn't be like they are. Whatever argument we have in the other person that triggers that response here, it's not so much the response of anger that is the cause. It's the underlying belief. No, they shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't be like that. Right? I know how the other person should be. That's the real cause. That belief that we hold on to, and that's what Nisargadatta and Byron Katie are talking about. Until we really examine that and see the mechanics of it, we're just condemned to repeat it. We go on, the other person does this or that, anger arises, what can I do? I've tried not to be angry. I can see it has consequences, but after a while I can just feel like, I guess I'm just an angry person. What can I do? But this is not really investigating, not really examining the true causes of what's holding that pattern in place. And only until we do, or consistently over a period of time, using whatever our reactivity is as a flag to draw our attention to what needs to be looked at, then over time, that unconscious causation will tend to diminish. Probably won't happen overnight, probably won't happen the first time you see it, but it will happen over time if we are diligent and devoted to really examining those underlying causes in ourself. Not it actually has very little to do with the other person. The reaction happens here. Other people will do what they do. We have very little control about that. But here we can choose to look at that deeply. Okay, so that's what we can do to sort of dismantle dysfunctional cause and pairings, right? Okay, but here's the real underlying question. If when we look deeply, we find that there actually isn't a personal self, to whom does karmic debt or merit accrue to? At the end of the day, it's just what happens. And as long as we haven't examined that, it continues to affect how what appearances appear within view, and consequently how we take ourselves to be. But if we see through that, see it as a function of conditioning, seeing that this fundamental awareness presence is beyond conditioning, not as an escape from the conditioning, but just to give us a little daylight between what we truly are and this individual conditioning. That's helpful. That allows us to remain objective, remain present, even when we see really difficult things about ourselves.